Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/heroes, villains, and sidekicks. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Episode 29, iZOMBIE, with a special interview with co-creator Mike Allred. iZOMBIE was created by writer Chris Robertson and artist Michael Allred and was published by DC Comics' Vertigo imprint in 2012 and lasted 28 incredibly fun issues that revolved around Gwendolyn Price and some gruesome monsters such as zombies, ghosts, vampires, and the most blood-curdling of them all, a were-terrier. Now, okay, to be fair, the were-terrier was actually a really nice guy named Scott, or Spot, however you want to call him. And really, Gwen and all her friends, they were the actual monsters in the series. Now, the first appearance of all the characters from iZOMBIE isn't actually in iZOMBIE 1. They first actually appeared in a short story in the first House of Mystery Halloween annual in 2009. So what I figured I'd do in this episode is talk about the comic first, and then about the CW show, and then maybe about a little bit how the two overlap, how they're similar. Then what we'll do is we'll roll right into the interview with Mike Allred, who, I gotta tell you, is one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to. Now, he is super crazy busy. He has got so many projects underway, and he took the time to talk with me about iZOMBIE and his new series, Bug, The Adventures of Forager, and, just a really nice guy, fun interview. And this episode is actually, I'm going to include we did an interview where we talked about a couple different things. So in this episode, we're going to just play the part of the interview where we talk about iZOMBIE. Now, there is another part of the interview where we actually talk about Bug, his new book, and I'll be doing a show on that series and that character in a couple weeks, and of course then I'll add that part of the interview on. I mean, we talk about all sorts of crazy stuff. Bug, we talk about the creative process, we talk about Kirby. Again, just a really fun interview and a really nice guy. So look for that one probably within 2 weeks. So who is, or what is, Gwen Price? Well, when the story begins, we find Gwen leaning on a shovel in a pair of overalls in the cemetery, waiting for a funeral to end in her hometown of Eugene, Oregon. Now, also the fun thing to know about this comic is that is where Mike is from. So the comic itself is set in Eugene and has all these sort of Eugene locations like the University of Oregon and the Shelton McMurphy Johnson House and the McDonald Theater. So all these places that he knows about and he sees, he's intimately aware of this place. And the city itself is almost a character. Well, she's there, and she's waiting around, and you think, what's happening? Now, there's nothing nefarious going on. Gwen works the cemetery, and she's just waiting to finish up her workday to sort of bury this body, help her and the rest of her crew bury a body. So when the funeral ends, her and her crew go to work, and they, fill in the hole and call it a day. But as the others in the crew leave, Gwen makes an excuse and tells she forgot something and that she'll see him tomorrow. So she heads back into the cemetery. Now, looking over her shoulder, Gwen heads over to a mausoleum. She opens the door and enters. Now, see, Gwen lives in the cemetery, and she sort of hangs out there with her friend Ellie. And Ellie is a ghost who died about 40 years ago. She's like a 60s-era ghost, really kind of mod-looking dress. And Gwen lives in the cemetery because, as you might have guessed by the title, she's a zombie. And working in the cemetery and living there allows her to know when and where to dig for a fresh meal. Now, she isn't the sort of Romero, shambling, incoherent type of zombie that is, all hungry for flesh. No, Gwen can totally pass as human as long as she eats a brain a month. Now, if she goes without eating a brain a month, then she does go all Romero, and she can be an extra in The Walking Dead in a matter of no time. But this way, she eats a brain, she retains her memories and her sort of her human form. So she has a little bit of a heightened strength as far as zombies go. She can, of course, pass as human. Now, her body doesn't regenerate or anything. It's dead. So if you remember the movie Death Becomes Her, I used to love that movie, where if the people that are alive forever, if they get hurt, they don't regenerate. So she's the same. And there's a neat other little wrinkle that this comic has in the whole zombie thing is when Gwen actually eats a deceased person's brain, I guess that's the only kind of brain that you can eat, she not only gets, a full tummy, but she also gets flashes and the memories of their lives. Now, as the story goes on, we get to meet some of Gwen's friends, Ellie, a ghost who we mentioned, who died about 40 years ago, and Scott, and this is a funny one, he is a were-terrier. And they affectionately call him Spot, and he is just that. He actually was inhabited by the soul, and we'll get into this in a little bit, of a terrier. So he is a were-terrier. He turns into like a shaggy dog. So he's not violent, he's not mean, he's sort of cute and cuddly. But their lives get very complicated when they go trick-or-treating one Halloween and get candy from a creepy stranger in a mask at this house. Now, later that night, Gwen feeds on a guy that she just buried earlier that we talked about, and she starts getting flashes of this guy's death. She then realizes that this guy was murdered and that he died in the creepy stranger's house they visited at Halloween. So, cue the Nancy Drew theme, the gang starts to investigate, and Gwen heads over there and comes face to face with the murderer. Now, his name is Ammon. And it's pretty funny. It sort of turns it up on its head. She enters the house and it's all creepy and she's skulking through and she comes into a room and it's very well lit. And then there's this guy, Ammon, just standing there all dapper, offering her a martini and saying he's so glad that they finally got to meet. I mean, he knows her name, everything. And actually, Ellie's there because she was wanting to check it out before Gwen got there. And that's one of the coolest things about the book. You're constantly and pleasantly surprised at the twists and turns the story takes. It doesn't get stuck in cliches. It just sort of does different things. And this isn't just done with the writing. The art and the colors by Mike and Laura Allred complement each other on such a level you cannot imagine the world that they've created looking any differently. Hey, full disclosure here. I am a huge Mike Allred fan and of his incredibly talented wife who colors pretty much all his work. And we're actually going to talk about their process in the interview, so make sure you stick around and listen to that at the end. So back to Gwen. Meeting Ammon is a huge turning point in the comic because it's then she and we as the readers get a much larger on the perspective of who she is and all the other creatures are that inhabit Eugene, Oregon, what they really are. Like, what is a ghost? What is a vampire? So Gwen, see, she isn't just a mere zombie, if that's just a mere thing, but she isn't a mere zombie. She's a revenant. Now, as Ammon describes it, normally when a body dies, the soul departs for the great unknown. But on rare occasions, the body or soul can remain behind. Now, sometimes the soul stays in its own body. Sometimes it's just sort of on its own, floating around. And that, not only that, but that there are two parts of the souls. There's the oversoul and an undersoul. Now, the undersoul, or the conscious mind, is seated in the brain and contains thoughts, memories, and personality. The undersoul, the unconscious mind, is seated in the heart and contains appetites, fears, and emotions. Now, depending on what soul sticks around, or if the body sticks around or the soul sticks around, however that sort of switcheroo works, determines the supernatural identity that is created. So, like, here's the rundown, for example. Ghosts are bodiless oversouls. So they're usually good. They're not bad. And then you have poltergeists, which are bodiless undersouls. Then you have vampires. They are bodies without undersouls. So they're always thirsting for emotions through blood. Then we have zombies, which are bodies without oversouls. And then finally we have revenants, which are very unique in that they possess both oversouls and undersouls. So Gwen then realizes and learns that she's not just a mere zombie, but a revenant who possesses both an undersoul and an oversoul, making her incredibly special as far as things go in the supernatural world. But even though she's learned all this, she still has a problem. this guy who's giving her all this great info is still a murderer, she feels. She knows he killed this person. And it's then he tells her that he not only kills people, yes, but he kills guilty people. And that technically he doesn't really even need to murder them. He could just sort of suck the souls out. But heck, they're bad people, so he's doing good. He's killing bad people. It's sort of like Dexter, right? Well, Gwen then starts to get flashes because she's only seeing good things to this point about this guy she's been sort of flashing on. Then she starts seeing some bad things up to the point where you realize this guy actually murdered somebody who was a jogger that he sort of hooked up with, even though he was married, and that he actually murders this person. So she still says, there's not something I could do. I couldn't kill someone. I couldn't eat a living person's brain. And then Ammon drops another huge bomb that she has to. She really needs to, because if she keeps eating the brains of corpses, she will be reduced to a mindless sort of Romero-like zombie. She doesn't really believe him until he says, oh yeah, well then tell me, Gwen, how did you die again? And she suddenly realizes that she really has no memory of anything about her past. She sort of can remember up to a certain point, and then it's just blank. So I'm going to jump a little ahead here and there because there's so many awesome things that happen in this series that I'd love to get into, but this podcast would go on really, really long, and we'd start covering other characters that, aren't what this origin story is about, which is sort of like Gwen and her sort of travel through the book. But one thing I do, of course, want to mention here is that a few little plot points. Gwen does find love in the book. She finds a very handsome guy. Here's the problem, though. She doesn't realize that he is actually part of a huge sort of monster hunting corporation that, of course, would his people would not be very happy to know that he is seeing a zombie. But that's okay, because he doesn't realize he's seeing a zombie. I mean, that's really not until, of course, things start ramping up. And once that happens, the truth comes out, and they all have to reconcile that. Now let's get to the part where things start ramping up. Now, as the story progresses, Gwen learns that she and Ammon have an actual history. She learns that there is something coming. A Lovecraftian devourer of worlds named, I'm going to say this incredibly wrong, Xtula? And this thing will suck every soul on the planet dry, leaving our little mud ball, well, I guess just that, a little mud ball. And we learn that Ammon has fought this beast quite a while. The last time he fought it was probably like over 500 years ago, if I remember correctly. And he helped sort of not destroy it, but keep it at bay. And so he's not really killing it. He's holding off our destruction. And him and two others end up sort of sacrificing, thousands of souls, a whole civilization, really, that's actually wiped from our memory, to make this thing go back into its other dimension. And he's been planning and preparing for it to come back. And one of the preparations was to find this Gwen here who could become this powerful revenant. And Gwen actually learns over time, because she starts having flashes, some memories, and it's not a brain she's eaten. She's realized it's her own memories. She actually realizes she has known Ammon, that Ammon got a hold of her and talked to her, and she believed him. And she actually took her own life so that she could come back as a revenant to help fight this monster. But here's the problem. She finds out from Ammon that to not kill the monster again, but sort of send him away, she needs to sacrifice. She needs to suck the souls of the residents of the entire city, killing, tens of thousands probably, to just send this monster away. Now, at this point, she's having a really hard time with this because A, she's just sort of, this revelation is just sort of coming to her. B, she's also now, at this point in the book, she has gotten to remember her brother and has been reunited with them. She remembers her family. She is going to be killing them all if she does this, including her boyfriend. And it's not something she wants to do, obviously. So this is where the story really comes to an end. Gwen is up against this thing. It's there. It looks pretty creepy, very Cthulhu-like, and it starts to destroy things. It actually sucks Ammon dry, and Gwen realizes that, wait a second, this thing is a gigantic, powerful soul, or countless numbers of powerful souls. I'm supposed to suck the souls of the city. Why don't I do it to this monster, to Actula? So that's what she does. She goes at the monster, towards the monster, drawing its power away. And as it becomes smaller, she becomes larger, like she's towering over buildings. She's glowing. And she actually, it just sucks it dry to it just disappears. And then at that point, she is filled with all of this just beyond ancient beings' power. And of course, that has consequences. So once this happens, almost instantly, like within the 2 pages, she cannot stay on our realm anymore. She can't be on Earth. She can't be in our dimension. She is too powerful. So she opens a crack in the dimensional wall, I guess. I don't know what it would be called. And goes into this other dimension to explore and to become a higher being. Almost sort of like, in Angel, right? When the girl, I'm blanking on her name. Wow. When she ends up going up to be a higher power. Of course, I hope Gwen's higher powerness is a lot less boring than hers was in Angel, because that seemed pretty boring. So there she goes. She's up. She's gone, and the comic just ends. Now the good thing is, it doesn't just end, because we do get some pages where sort of Gwen is able to come back a little bit, her mind at least, and channel through one of her friends to tell us how everything went in the end with all her friends, like her boyfriend, her brother, Spot, everybody. And it's really nice because, we learn that everyone, pretty much their lives or unlives, really live, they all live pretty happily ever after. So it's pretty nice. And now a quick word from our sponsor. For you, the listeners of the Hero, Villains, and Sidekicks Show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their services. Now, in the last show, I said I was listening to some old books, and you got to remember that. You don't have to just check out new books. I'm working through the Foundation series, and I'm on second Foundation now. I've forgotten how much I love these books. So remember, you don't have to just get a new book, get an old book. Go check out Asimov again. Go check out Clive Barker, Stephen King. I'm a huge Barker fan, so I think I'm going to hit some of his books next. So go ahead, head over and get your free audiobook download today. Just go to audibletrial.com/heroes, villains, and sidekicks. Again, that's audibletrial.com, heroes, villains, and sidekicks for your free audiobook. Now back to the show. Okay, now let's talk about the TV show a little bit, iZombie over on the CW. Now, I have to say that, obviously I love the comic. So when I heard it was going to make its way to the small screen over on the CW network, I was pretty psyched. And now I've seen lots of TVs and movie adaptations from comics, and I am not one of those fans that if I'm not happy with it, I, rant and rave. They ruined it, because guess what? The comic still exists, and I know it because I just reread all the back issues of iZombie this weekend. So it's still there. But at the same time, I was a little worried to see what they were going to do, because it's such a rich world with all these weird and different characters. But, of course, guess what? If you've already watched it, you know this, but there are no vampires, I guess yet, ghosts or were-terriers, although I wish there was a were-terrier, and that the plot is very different. But the show is just fantastic. The actual origin of Gwen is changed substantially, as well as some of her motivations. For example, there's no Ammon or Actula, or there's no over or under souls. They might fool around with that idea. I don't know. They haven't yet, but I have to tell you, it's a really just great procedural television show. I look forward to it every week. Now, Gwen has been changed to Liv. That's her name, Liv Moore, which is pretty funny. And she's still a zombie, and she does gain the memory from brains she eats. But now she even inherits some of the attributes of the person the brain belonged to. So, for example, if she were to eat a brain of a magician, she would be doing magic tricks. Or if she actually, I think she, if I'm remembering some of these, she had the brains of a compulsive gambler, so she's betting on everything. She got the brains of someone who was very jealous, so she became a very jealous person. And that, of course, affects her relationships, affects her at work, and it's really fun, I'll be honest with you. So she's also has a different profession, speaking of work. She doesn't work at a cemetery anymore. She works at a morgue. And the show also takes place in Seattle, a little bit bigger city, because now she works with the police, so it has to revolve sort of around murders and solving cases and whatnot. But it isn't just that sort of procedural. There's this huge, really deep and cool backstory of how she got to be a zombie, who is doing this, why are they doing this, what does it mean to the world. There's great interactions with characters, and that's what's cool. It's like the comic. The characters are very well developed, the world is very well developed, and after the end of last season, there's probably a little bit of few spoilers here and there in this. You can see it all on Netflix. So I doubt you have time before tomorrow. It's going to be on Tuesday. I'm checking my calendar right now. Tuesday the 4th, April 4th. So you might not have time to watch them all, but you can always DVR it and then watch it later. So you can head over to Netflix, watch the whole first season. It's just a great show. I am going to be in front of the television tomorrow watching, because I cannot wait to see what they do on this season of iZombie. Now, let's get right to the interview. I had a great time talking with Mike Allred about this. I'm really hoping that I can meet him at a show and say hi, but he is crazy working all the time, which is good. I want him there, pencil in hand, making these great pages. Now, if you're not familiar with Mike, again, he did co-create iZombie. If you're not familiar with his art style, if you've watched iZombie, he was asked to do the title sequence, the intro sequence. That is his art, and those are his wife's colors. So it was really cool that the network said, and the production company said, we want you to do this, because they didn't have to do that. So I thought that was pretty neat. But Mike is also the creator of the comic Madman, and he has been the artist of countless comics, like in FF he worked, Ecstatic, just tons of stuff. Silver Surfer, which is so beautiful. And he's got a new comic series he's working on. It was just solicited in last month, the previews. And it's called Bug, The Adventures of Forager. And it has to do with the old, great Kirby character Bug from all the Fourth World things. So that is going to be fantastic. And again, I'm going to have an interview with him about that in a couple weeks. So I'm going to stop rambling. Guys, hope you enjoy my interview with Mike Allred. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is iZombie. And that was another comic of yours where the art and the colors and the subject matter, I thought, really, really clicked. And you're a co-creator on that.
Oh, yeah. Greg Roberson and I created iZombie.
And what was it like seeing this character, and I think if this was the first time this happened to you, what was it like seeing this character go from the comic book to then getting optioned and being on TV?
It was surreal. It has happened before. In one case, Universal Pictures had originally optioned Madman for big budget film, and it got a lot of play in the trades, the Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety. And so I started getting contacted by other producers wanting to know what else I had available. And so almost everything I've ever created has been at least optioned. It's weird how that happens. But one producer, Rick Albert, actually followed through and made a feature film of G-Men from Hell, which are among the very first characters I ever created and had published, even pre-Frank Einstein Madman, these G-Men characters, who then show up in Madman comics. Yeah. But he actually made this really fun, crazy, low-budget G-Men from Hell movie with Christopher Coppola directing, his brother, Francis Coppola's nephew. And really cool cast. William Forsythe and Tate Donovan as the G-Men, and Bobcat Goldthwait's in it. Gary Busey. Robert Goulet plays the devil.
Robert Goulet is the devil. That's perfect. I could just see the little mustache.
Yeah, it's insane. Every cast member, David Huddleston, who was the Rich Lebowski in The Big Lebowski, plays Dr. Buffard.
Oh, wow.
It's nuts. So anyway, that was a trip, because while we're taking meetings and Universal is, throwing the red carpet down, flying me down and putting me up in fancy hotels and whatnot. And that's how I met Robert Rodriguez, by the way, too, through Universal Pictures. But that was a crazy experience because with Universal, it was just a lot of talking. And then in the meantime, Sunmill Productions with Rick Albert and Christopher Coppola, they just started making the movie. It was wild. And so they flew us down, put us up in the Disneyland Hotel. So all of our kids were at Disneyland all day, or they were, because I was usually on the set. I wasn't working, not by any stretch, but watching this movie get made. Yeah. I have a cameo as some wino who they give the keys to a Rolls Royce to at the end of the movie. So yeah, that was really wild. Where again, it was just a lot of talking with the big boys and a lot of doing with this young, energetic crew who were just making the movie. Yeah. And so I got to do that. And then from there, I let the option lapse because Robert Rodriguez to make a Madman movie. And from there, the talking continued, but there was a lot of doing because with Robert, I actually ended up doing a little something on pretty much every movie of his after that. Even like, for instance, our youngest Kelvy is a Spy Kid and Spy Kids 2, and we're the parents of the Spy Kid at this big gathering of spies. And,
man. My son loved those. We watched all of those multiple times.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's become this standard for, it's like an instant classic, those movies. Yeah. But yeah, just little things here and there. I created the mascot design at the high school in the faculty, things like that. And similarly with Kevin Smith, who I had met. And so there was a lot of stuff happening with filmmakers and film. I even made a couple of my own no-budget movies. So there was a lot of that, and I was getting pulled in different directions because I also have a band called The Gear, and we've made a couple of albums and are on our third album. So for most of the 90s and most of the 2000s, it was like, what do I want to do? Do I want to make music, movies, or comics? And ultimately, I realized that my happy place was comics, where I had so much control, or when collaborating would be with this very simplified, partnership. Yeah. Whether it was Peter Milligan or Matt Fraction or Dan Slott or Chris Roberson and now Gerard and my brother. It's just this very simple, pure creative process. Or then when I'm doing my own stuff, it's just putting what's in my head onto paper, and everything else is collaborative, which I love, but collaborative in a very big way. Right. Like with a movie, you're dealing with a film crew, and everybody's got their own individual job, and then even more intimate with the band, where you're just trying to get in that pocket and be tight, and everybody working together right, and playing live where it's a whole other experience. All of these things are very similar too. They all have a certain musical rhythm. Comics, very much for me, have a musical rhythm, and so I'm very keen on making sure that the panels, pow, pow, and boom, where your big explosive moments like you would have in a song or a film. That's the same thing with a comic, but with comic, it's just more. It's the most pure storytelling medium I can imagine, because it really boils down to this essence, which you just can't get that purity close, but not quite with music or film. So I've just more rededicated myself to comics, and my productivity has multiplied like crazy, and cut back on a lot of traveling and stuff to just be more and more productive, because it's just a very, very fulfilling experience for me. And so having said all that, with Madman, Robert Rodriguez, one of my favorite people in the whole world. Obviously, we haven't made a Madman movie,
right,
but he was always there, always kept me involved, always wanted me involved, wanting to co-direct the film with me like he did with Frank and Sin City, which I got together for him, by the way.
Oh,
you're welcome.
There you go. Thank you.
And but my point is, as I visualized that and continued to visualize it, there was always kind of this optimism that eventually became a realization that Robert always has several things happening, and of course the things that are more personal to him are going to take precedent.
Right.
And or with Sin City, he thought that would be a great opportunity to do a lot of these experiments, which were very groundbreaking with the first film, and which were going to benefit a Madman film. Mm-hmm. And so that was our justification for moving that ahead of Madman. The first film was a very unexpected hit. And so when talking about sequels, there's no waiting, because you've got to do the Spy Kids while they're still kids.
That's right.
So he did the second and third. He owed another mariachi film to, I think it was Colombia, with Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Yeah.
So, but through all that, I mean, there's no frustration or animosity or regret. Because every step of the way, every time a Madman movie got delayed or put back, or if we went back to the drawing board, it was always a really fun, enjoyable experience. It was around the same time I was thinking, well, one of the problems we had with Madman was trying to jam everything into a 2-hour film. And as more and more superior entertainment on television, as opposed to movie screens,
right?
It became more attractive to me to think of Madman as a TV series. So right as I was kind of rejiggering that in my head and wanting to visualize Madman as this continuing thing, iZOMBIE and the possibility of it came at us. So iZOMBIE took off so quickly and went into production so quickly. It was mind-blowing. It was, and that's surreal is the best word to describe this experience, because I'd had years and years of learning how to be realistic about something going into production, and here this was blowing away all reality. And just, I think Jeff Johns, I think we were having breakfast, like just Laura, Jeff, and I, and then later with Chris. And so it kind of was this casual, hey, what would you think about iZOMBIE as a TV show? There's some talk about it. And me going, yeah, sure, fine, great, yeah, let's do it. Not taking it seriously for a second. And then, and then Chris and I all of a sudden having these serious, this is really happening, isn't it? To what they were really happening.
Wow.
Shelley Bond, who was the head of Vertigo at the time, is the first editor I ever had. The first professional paying gig I ever had was for a company called Kamiko, and we had a series called Jaguar Stories. Me and Steve Siegel, who was the first person I ever collaborated with. Anyway, so she was our editor, and then after Kamiko went away, she went to Vertigo and still remains one of my best friends in the business. So same with Steve Siegel. Anyway, so she was always looking for things for me to do. I would do like Fables covers or an issue here or things here and there. And she was always looking for new ideas from me. And I was always trying to get something going with Gerard Way, and so throwing ideas around. And so with iZOMBIE, she called me up and told me about this fella, Chris Roberson, who had this idea, and did it sound like something that I'd be interested in. And at that point, it was what the TV show essentially is. A girl, it's a a brain and absorbs the personalities and memories of that brain. And so that was the germ of the idea, and it lit me up. All kinds of ideas just started pouring into my head, so I threw them back at Shelley and Chris. Of course, we then started talking at that point, and just went back and forth, and figuring out the personalities of the characters, the situations where they should be. And one funny thing that happened was Shelley told Chris that I wanted to see it set in Eugene, Oregon, where I live. And Shelley told me that Chris thought it'd be a cool idea to have it set in Eugene, Oregon, where I live. So until we compared notes, Chris and I each thought it was the other's idea to have it take place in Eugene, Oregon. But in any event, it was a really cool idea because I have, the University of Oregon here where they built Animal House. There's Spencer's Butte, and it's this really interesting, cool place. And so it fed a lot of the spirit into the comic book. And then, of course, just flash forwarding ahead with the TV show, it then boiled back down. So with our book, it became this monster book where we just kept expanding this universe and theories of monsters and what made them monsters and whatnot. With the TV series, it boiled right back down to that essential, simple idea, which made it great for weekly procedural where by having her eating the brains of a deceased person that died in a less than wonderful way, she is able to use her abilities to solve crimes, which is perfect for a serial. Yeah. So it ends with Eugene not being really a place where a lot of murders happen ever. The location was switched to Seattle, which made a lot more sense to keep her busy.
So the show that's really interesting because, I remember watching it and was like, wow, this is, some points are very similar, but some things are very, diverge quite a bit from the story. But now you're telling me your initial idea was this sort of episodic brain of the week or brain of the month.
Yeah.
And then, did you know they were going to do that, or is it something all of a sudden you went to a meeting and they were like, this is how we're changing it?
Oh, did we know? No, with the TV show?
Yeah.
Well, with the comic book, it was going to be a brain of the month, brain of the issue kind of thing. And, of course, obviously we can see we expanded in whole other different ways.
Yeah.
With the TV show, it was brought to us that this is what we'd like to do. And for the reasons that I just said, it all made sense.
Yeah.
I'm having worked in TV and film, I'm not in that shock of hey, this is nothing like the comic book. Because I realized that the two mediums are very different, and some things work better in one than the other. So the only thing I initially, I can't even, it seemed like there was one thing that I objected to, and I can't even remember what it is now. Because since I've fallen in love with the TV show, and all the actors and creators or the showrunners are just the best people.
The casting,
I love everything they do.
Yeah, the casting to me has just been fantastic. I mean, obviously the main character, Liv, and just each person just brings just the perfect mix to the show. I mean, they all seem to really work well together.
Yeah. And they're always reminding people unnecessarily that it's based on a comic book.
Well, I mean, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm sure most of the people that watch it have no idea of the comic book. otherwise I'd be filthy rich.
Yeah, that was my next question. I mean, how many, I've mentioned to people at work, and we were talking about shows coming back on, and I said, oh, I can't wait, iZombie, the comic was, they're like, what? It was a comic? I'm like, yes, it was a comic. So I bring my trades in and I pass them out for everybody to read.
Yeah, so it was, it was their idea to have the intro have this comic book style kind of introduction, and asked me to create it, and Laura Color it, of course. But they didn't have to do that. And then the scene breaks looked like comic book panels.
Yeah.
At one point, there was a superhero character in an episode that was named Chris Allred, after Chris and I. So they're not shy about reminding people that its origins were in a comic book, and I think that's very flattering and considerate, and it shows the respect, mutual respect that we all have for each other. It's an ideal situation.
Yeah, I had not thought of that because yes, technically it's a comic. Some people might not be familiar with, so there was really no reason to do that comic intro. So wow, that's really great to know. That's really interesting. Let's see, what was I going to say? Now now of course it's going to be on Tuesday the 4th. Is your DVR going to be going off, or do you sit there and are just waited with bated breath to watch what happens?
Both.
I know.
Watch it over and over again.
There you go.
But yeah, we have access to the episodes, long before they air, and I got to a point where we started having an iZombie night where friends and family would come over and watch the show together.
Nice.
And I got to where I wanted to see it for the first time with them, so I just stopped accessing the episodes. And I really love, seeing it come across like that.
That's great. That's great. And now this was. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to mention the showrunners, Rob Thomas and Diane Rochelle Wright. They're just the coolest people, and they just make things fun and alive. And initially, I think I had a huge dose of healthy skepticism because I did not want to be disappointed. And so I just, had no expectations whatsoever, and waiting to see how it would all turn out. And I love it.
Yeah,
I think they're great. And at this point, I just have complete faith in them and their plans and what they want to do. And all of the writers in the writers' room, just really terrific, solid people. I just feel very fortunate. And
this new season, it really seems like it's going to be, it's almost like when The Walking Dead was just like the small band, and then all of a sudden, there were villages and stuff. Now we've gone from, this small, cadre of zombies and only a few people knowing to, at the end of the last episode, getting this bomb of, there's a fraction of the government that pretty much wants to create like zombie nation.
Yeah, it kicked up a little bit, epic-wise.
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost Rob Thomas, right? No more Matchbox 20.
The Matchbox 20 Rob Thomas, but
right, not the showrunner Rob Thomas, right?
Yeah, he's alive and well.
All right,
but yeah, that was a little in-joke for them because they always get confused with each other.
Oh,
Rob Thomas, the showrunner, has been pretty famous for other shows he's created, like Veronica Mars. I was a big fan of Party Down, and just really fun, sharp, smart people.
Mike, I want to thank you again so much for talking to me about iZombie and Bug. It's been a real pleasure. I want to thank you again.
Well, thank you for your interest. Couldn't do it without you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the night.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.